what was the agenda of Nazi, of Hitler and the Nazi regime? And we know that besides they had their agenda was to conquer the world, and while conquering the world, to get rid of Judaism, to say goodbye to Judaism. And one second, so were they successful, the Nazis? Unfortunately, to a certain degree, they were very successful. They didn't achieve their goal, but they unfortunately managed to kill many, many, many Jews in the way. But were they ultimately successful in uprooting Judaism? I would say that to a certain extent, Judaism, they were. Judaism was very weakened after the Holocaust. And many people, even those that did survive physically, many of them lost their faith. That's a reality that happened. Some people ran away from Judaism, didn't want to have anything to do with it. They lost their excitement in Judaism, their passion or their belief in God after the trauma and terror that they suffered and went through. And nobody could ever judge them. But ultimately, we are standing here now, some 75 odd years from the Holocaust. And the question that we have is Judaism still alive? So the answer obviously is, we're standing here, and Nazism hopefully is gone. It may have its rebirth in certain different ways and different avenues, but ultimately the Nazi agenda has gone. But there's still the ramifications of it. There's still certain ramifications. I know this is a little bit of a question that many people don't really want to ask, or don't even discuss.
Still around.
Sorry?
It hasn't gone.
Heaps of Nazis still around.
It hasn't gone.
Which you're talking about, people, the anti-Semitism and that desire to get rid of Judaism.
Yeah, but the way you know them,
Nazis, yeah.
The way you know them from 80 years ago, still alive and well today.
Absolutely. The whole Dovadah, Malek, it's...
Oh, yeah.
Looking exactly the same.
The Nazis themselves are gone, but if you were to ask, since then, since the time of the Holocaust, Second World War, what has gotten stronger? Nazism or Judaism? I see that you're
trying to work out it. No, you want to go first or me?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Judaism, of course, has definitely recovered since the Holocaust, and it's recovered in many different directions. There's a lot of diversity there. Nazism and what Nazism stands for has also recovered. And there's enough Jewish groups around the world warning, not to be complacent about that.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying people should be complacent about it, by the way. And I don't think we should be complacent, although I don't think we should fear it either. I think that we're in a very different position to where we were prior to the Holocaust. I don't feel we should fear anything, to be honest. As anybody that watched my shir last week, the last couple of weeks will know that that's a fundamental belief in Judaism, that we have bitachon. We have to take the right precautions. Doesn't mean we should be stupid, but it certainly means that we shouldn't live in fear. Fear is not healthy if it's anything other than an awe and a desire to connect to Hashem. That's the only real fear that we should have. And that's our bitachon discussion. So we shouldn't be living in fear, but we shouldn't be complacent. I agree. We should not be complacent in the sense that we should be aware that they exist, and we should. I don't think that I don't know if necessarily. Personally, I believe that this is the answer to this problem. My belief is that the answer to the problem of the resurfacing of Nazism and the answer to anti-Semitism in general, every single generation, you will have people that will stand up with the desire and the passion and the want to destroy Judaism, and they'll always find a different, whether it's Israel, whether it's that we're too wealthy or that we're too poor, or that we're the scoundrels of the earth. There's every single excuse. In every generation, there's always another excuse of why we should be annihilated. Ultimately, I believe that the one and most important thing that we can do to fight anti-Semitism, and this is a discussion in of itself, is through bringing strong and strengthening Judaism. And I think that that's the only real answer, long-term answer. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have security, and yes, we need to have a strong Israeli defense force, and that's a very big and very important thing, and our politicians have to be strong. That's the natural side of things. But ultimately, I think that the most important element of fighting Nazism, anti-Semitism, any type of hatred towards Judaism, is by strengthening Judaism itself. Strengthening our own personal commitment to Judaism, and by strengthening the communal and the awareness and the pride in Judaism. Now, why that is a discussion for another time when we talk about anti-Semitism. But what I did want to talk about is about how the Rebbe fought Nazism and how the Rebbe looked at it. Now, I suppose it's debatable, but I don't think it's really debatable anymore, that the most influential Jew of the 20th century on the Jewish world is the Rebbe. Post-Holocaust, I can't imagine any other Jew that has had a large impact individually than the Rebbe. Of course, there's some, hey, Reuven, Bruchim Habayim. Of course, there's some other factors to put into the equation, and there's some important politicians that helped the birth of Israel. It wasn't one individual people, it was the work of many people. So if you were to think of about a day that was particularly important on the Jewish calendar of the last century, I would say that today's date is a really important day. Because to me, a Judaism without the Lubavitcher Rebbe would be a very, very, very different Judaism today. And I don't think any of us really could understand the impact that he had, not just by creating Chabad houses and the outreach, but the impact on other groups, on how much he encouraged other groups to work hard and spread. Just to give you an example, Mount Scopus College and Bialy College, which were two of the first Jewish day schools in Melbourne, were seeds planted by emissaries of the Rebbe. Okay, when at the time they had no Jewish day schools, and I think my grandfather, Rabbi Groner, came and they wanted to build a Jewish hospital, and he said, no, what you have to do is you have to build Jewish education hospitals. You can have hospitals are okay with the non-Jews. We don't need special hospitals, but first we've got to build Jewish education. That's one example. There's thousands of such examples throughout the world of non-Chabad organizations that were literally strengthened and came to birth through the Rebbe and his emissaries. So I don't think that I or any person could really understand the broad depth of the Rebbe's impact on post-Holocaust Jewry. So therefore, what's the day that the Rebbe was saved from the clutches of the Holocaust? In 1939, his predecessor, his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, managed to come to America, escaped to America. It was a whole long thing, how he got visas, etc. But his son-in-law, who was the Rebbe, and his daughter-in-law, they were living in the 30s in Berlin. After they got married, they moved to Berlin to study and to work. And he studied over there. He studied, I think it was engineering, and a few other things. And the University of Berlin, which at the time was considered the most prestigious of universities. And then when the Nazis came to power in 1933, or over the next few years, I can't remember the exact date, he eventually moved to Paris. And then when the Holocaust, the Second World War broke out, and his father-in-law managed to get visas, couldn't get visas for him, he kept on trying to find ways to help him escape. After they occupied Poland, the Nazis, they came for France. And they came to Paris, so the Jews escaped Paris. And I think they went to Nice, and they tried to get visas, and eventually he got a visa in, I think it was, how do you pronounce it? Marseilles.
Marseille.
Marseille. So that's where he gets his visa. But then, even then, it takes a long time to come, and he keeps on having to dodge the Nazis, and goes into hiding. But during the years that he spends in Paris, he sets up a bunch of organizations which end up continuing even post the Holocaust. This is even before he's the Rebbe, and Paris becomes one of the strongholds of future Chabad birth. Okay, eventually, to make a long story short, in 1941, he does manage to get onto a boat and safely make it to the shores of America. So I actually wanted to just show a quick video of it, and why I like this video is because my grandfather actually appears in it, and he was one of the people that was sent by the previous Rebbe to greet the Rebbe when he arrived. Did you see the screen?
Yes.
After a 12-day voyage across the Atlantic, they finally stepped foot on U.S. soil, arriving at Pier 8 on Staten Island. The ship's manifest lists the hundreds of passengers that arrived that day. Name of passenger, Schneerson, Mendel. Occupation, Rabbi. Race, Hebrew. Place of birth, Soviet Union, Nikolaev. Passage paid for by parents-in-law. Destination address, Joseph Schneerson, 770 Eastern Parkway, New York. Marks of identification, wears a beard.
I was standing with my father, Oliver Sholem, upstairs in
That's my
Gan Eden
grandfather.
HaTachten, ready to go in to the Frierdiker Rebbe for Yechidus. Because on that night, on Chof Ches Sivan, I officially became a Talmud in Tomchei Tmimim. As we were standing outside in Gan Eden HaTachten upstairs to wait to go in, Rabbi Jacobson, Oliver Sholem, came out from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he goes over to my father, and he says, Ramordche, der Rebbe hat gesagt, a die Yeshiva soll rausgehen mit Kabelponim sein mein Nedim. Mein Nedim ist Klar Shas, Teusvis, Rosh in Ran und alle chassidische drucktes Wort. When we came to the pier, of course there was blockades, you couldn't go close to the port, but over there was already the Alte Rebbetzin, the Chamadina, and the Rashag, and I think Chana, and we, the Bochum, was standing on the side. Then suddenly we see how the Rebbetzin came out, followed by the Rebbe. The Rebbe was wearing then a lightish hat and a suit, a light rider suit. Vice he gave Shalom Aleichem to everybody on that side. When it came to me, so Jacobson said, "Das is a koref."
A ferry took them to Manhattan, and from there they were driven to 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, finally reunited with their illustrious father. The young yeshiva students anxiously awaited their first glimpse of the Rebbe's children.
I remember very clearly how when the cars pulled up in front of 770 and the Rebbe's and Dina, the Chomadina, got out of the car and also, and of course the Rebbe's and Chaim Lushke, and how the Rebbe came out and they walked up the steps to 770. As soon as we saw them, because our class was right by the windows, so understandably that we went over to the door, which opened up to the main hallway over there. And we stood there, and as he came in, so we gave him shalom.
The older Chassidim came all day long to give shalom to the Rebbe and his wife and the Rebbe, because they lived right there in 770.
Okay, I just wanted to give you that as a little introduction to the story of the Rebbe's arrival. Of course, when you hear for me, it's very special when I hear my grandfather saying that he was told by Rabbi Jacobson, the Rabbi Jacobson told the Rebbe that this is a curve, that he's a relative. So, of course, we're very distant relations to the Rebbe. We're also, we both, both myself and the Rebbe descend from the second Chabad Rebbe. So the Rebbe actually is a descendant of the third Chabad Rebbe, who was a descendant of the second Chabad Rebbe as well, because the third Chabad Rebbe actually married the daughter of the second Chabad Rebbe. Sorry to confuse you. And we are grandchildren. Sorry, I should put a tree on it just to simplify. Rabbi Gronaz and my grandfather, we are descendants of the second Chabad Rebbe. He had a daughter that was named Menucha Rachel, who was apparently a very righteous woman that was sent by the second Chabad Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, to Israel to establish a Chabad community. And that was in the 1800s. So early 1800s. So you see Chabad has roots going all the way back there. And that's my Chabad roots going all the way back to Chabad's earliest time within the old city of Jerusalem and Hebron. Okay, now, so what I want to talk to you about is how...
1 sec, please, continue.
Sorry?
Before you continue, can you send the link out when you get a minute to the video, please?
I could post it on the chat. Is that what you want, or do you want to continue the clip now?
No, that's good. That's good. No worries, whichever way. It's beautiful.
All right, I'll continue the clip just because you asked.
He asked the Rebbe to verbrechen. The Rebbe said, today is Tuesday. I'll wait till Thursday and I'll have an aliyah and I'll bench Gomel. And then we will have a verbrechen.
I remember that when the Rebbe walked into the Farbrengen, he had a sitter in his right hand, and he walked in straight, sat down in the seat in 770 where I used to sit. There weren't a lot of people, the boys from the yeshiva and Chassidim. He spoke about Abot Sechem Lahoides. He described the four things that you bench going at, saving from the ocean, prison, sickness. And he spoke. Interesting was, every time he mentioned the previous Rebbe, his voice broke, like he was about to cry. It was a beautiful Nikunim, and he made an impression. He's someone different. Then, as a matter of fact, in the middle of Farbrengen, he says he's going to test the boys. They say that American boys are booking the Kutei Diburim from the Frierdiker Rebbe. He started asking questions. We weren't so bad. We answered most of all questions. And then there was a discussion about the Mechel was digging, two opinions about what sung. He sang one.
At that time, well, I was a teenager, a young teenager, and of course I was standing there listening. And after a short time, I just couldn't understand what he was saying. It was just above me. And I was standing next to one of the very choshev Bachrim, Herschel Schusterman, who there later became the Rov in Bnei Reuven Shul. I said, Herschel, I said to him, I don't understand anything. So he said, shh, neither do I.
It was a tremendous impression. His b'tiyas, his quotations here and there, etc. And at 9 to 3, and when he got up to walk out, his walking in, his manners, was something different.
Okay, I'll just copy the link just in case. All right, so one second. I'm just going to try to post it in the chat just in case anybody wants it. What I wanted to discuss for the continuation of today's class, I thought I would do something in honor of the Rebbe. It's also Gimel Tammuz is coming up. Sunday night, Gimel Tammuz is the day that the Rebbe passed away. The Rebbe's yahrzeit, physically leaving this world. As in, we stopped being able to physically see the Rebbe. We believe, and this is once again a discussion for another time, we do believe that the Rebbe is still very much leading us and very much involved in the Jewish world in his own way, and we feel to a certain degree his presence. But we certainly do not see him physically, but we see the impacts of his work and his blessings. So that's my honest feeling. So how did the Rebbe do what he did? And how did he fight Judaism, fight the Nazis in his way? How's Judaism still strong? And what was the Rebbe's way? So I wanted to take, in the short amount of time that we have left, just to take literally a few details. You can really discuss this for hours and what's the meaning behind each concept. But I will try to just say some of these concepts with a couple of stories for each one. And we'll see how much time allows us. Concept number one is that what the Rebbe wanted to create was not followers as much as he wanted to create leaders. This is something that you see really throughout the Rebbe's teachings. He wasn't, most leaders are trying to get followers. They're trying to get power, so to speak. The Rebbe was something different. He wanted to have leaders. And you see this many times in the way he interacted with people that he wanted to take upon himself leadership opportunities or leadership positions. For example, he would many times shluchim, he would send out shluchim, and ultimately he would say, in every time he sent out a shliach, when he started the shluchim's campaign, he said, I'm not forcing you, I'm not telling you to do it, I think this is what you should do. And then, let's say somebody accepted upon themselves to go on shlichus, very often the person would come to him and ask him for guidance. And the Rebbe almost always told him, you should go there, you should figure out what it is, find out what works for you and what works for the place, and decide yourself, make decisions. There was sometimes my great uncle, who was, you just saw my grandfather in that video, his brother was the Rebbe's personal secretary. And he once came to the Rebbe with a halacha question. And the Rebbe said, you know halacha, why don't you figure it out yourself? Go. And my great uncle was a big Talmid Chacham. He was a knowledgeable person. So he went, he got the answer, and he came back to the Rebbe, told him, this is what I think the answer. The Rebbe says, I would have come to the same conclusion as you. What did the Rebbe want to show him? That there's so much more that we know ourselves than we could, than if we would just allow ourselves to try to make decisions on our own. And of course, sometimes it's a decision that you couldn't make. There was one person, very often people would want to decide on big things, like if they should do something big in their shlichus. Sometimes the Rebbe gave them very clear instructions, but sometimes the Rebbe would say, this is a decision that you have to make. When it came to, okay, I'll tell you two stories that really stick out. They're actually quite famous stories, but they're powerful. In the early years, the Rebbe sent out, right at the beginning of his shlichus, he started sending out shluchim, right? The first shluchim that the previous Rebbe also sent up shluchim, but he first sent up shluchim. My grandfather was actually sent by the previous Rebbe to Australia, and then he was only sent here for 6 months, and then he came back, and then the Rebbe tried to encourage him to stay long term, and it took him a while, and he sent him shluchim to other places in America first and to other countries. But he sent shluchim first to Morocco. And it's an interesting thing that you'd think, a Sephardi country. Morocco was like the root and the home of Sephardi Judaism, the biggest Sephardi Jewish community. They had their own Sephardic rabbis, chachamim, and rabbanim. And like, why do they need Chabad? And the incredible thing is that Chabad was very successful in Morocco. And they're there till this day. Some of the longest lasting students, actually just a few months ago, one of the shluchim from Morocco that's been there for something like 60 years just passed away. And he's not even the first shluchim. The first shluchim that were there passed away already. And the previous chief rabbi, Rabbi Omar, still alive, maybe alive and well, he says that he learned as a kid in cheders set up by Chabad. And where he is today, he's the chief rabbi of Morocco. And that's where he learned in. So what did your Chabad go to do in Morocco? They went really to set up yeshivot, to set up places that Jews should learn, and really to improve the level of learning. Because they had the few rabbis that kind of learned, and it wasn't really given over necessarily to the what we would call the amcha, the lay people. And Chabad is about teaching the lay people, empowering the lay people. Everyone should know. One of the tremendous stories of the start of Chabad was this very concept. And I go on a bit of a tangent over here. The founder of the Chabad movement, his name was Rebbe Shnei Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, known as the Alter Rebbe. Now, the Alter Rebbe was a chassid, a follower of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was a follower of the founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov. Now, the Maggid of Mezrich had a group of great chassidim known as the Chevrai Kadisha, and he focused on them, and then they all became like shluchim in different parts of Russia and Poland. And that's how Hasidism spread. The Alter Rebbe was different to the rest of them, that they believed that they're there to influence and to teach, but not to explain the deep parts of Hasidus to the people. And the Alter Rebbe fundamentally disagreed with this. And that was the concept of Chabad, that everybody has to be on the level that they can understand Hasidus, they can understand spirituality within Judaism. And this is where he broke away from his fellow leaders of the Maggid of Mezrich. Most famously was Reb Shlomo Karolina, who was very close with him. They actually had relationships. Some of their grandchildren got married to each other. But they had a very, very big debate in this area, whether we should be giving the power over to the lay people, that they should have the understanding of the Hasidus and the Kabbalistic teachings in and of themselves. And the Alter Rebbe believed strongly that they should, and that's why he wrote the Tanya and all other books of Hasidus in the Chabad way, where people, normal lay people, could understand it. Okay, so this was a big thing of the Rebbe. Now, one of the two stories I want to tell you was about, the first one is about a man by the name of Rabbi Hecht, who in the early years was sent to New Haven. And when he was sent to New Haven, which is about 2 hours away from New York, he once called the Rebbe and he complained that he was going through certain hardships and he didn't feel like he was being successful. And the Rebbe told him that he should talk to Rabbi Hecht. Talk to himself. The Rebbe said, talk to yourself. And you should find within yourself. And he said, what do you mean, talk to myself? The Rebbe said, you should find within yourself the strength to go on. And you should find, you'll know that the strength that you have is within you. And if only you would reveal the strength and the inner given talent that you have. There's a lot more to that story, but I'll explain it to you with another man by the name of Rabbi Weinreb. Rabbi Tzvi Weinreb, who was not a Chabad Chassid. He was not Chabad. He was actually, he was a rabbinical student, but he was also a student. He was, when he was a young man, he studied psychology. And then he moved on to, I think it was Baltimore or something like that, to practice psychology. He also did some teaching, and he was doing a little bit of rabbinate. He was also a rabbi, but he felt kind of quite alone. But he'd grown up in Crown Heights. In the time, Crown Heights was like the hot place where all Jewish communities were, and eventually they moved out. But he had never met the Rebbe, but he had been to some Farbrengens of the Rebbe. So he's all alone. This is in the 60s. And he's having lots of doubts in Judaism and what he should do and how he should go on with his life. And he calls the Rebbe's office. And he specifically does not say who he is. And he says, I'm calling. I would like to get some advice from the Rebbe. And he explains that he was having some doubts in his Judaism and his career and what path he should take. He's having all these doubts. And he hears there's a shuffling on like another end of the line. And sometimes when the Rebbe's secretary did, sometimes the Rebbe would pick up and listen into the conversations. So he felt as though somebody else was listening to the conversation, the secretary. So the secretary says to him, where are you from? And he said, I think it was Baltimore. And he says, he overhears somebody else on the line who he recognizes the Rebbe's voice. Zogim, tell him he should talk. There's a man over there named Weinreb. He should talk to Weinreb. And he was shocked because he hadn't said what his name was. And he said, so Chodikov said, Rabbi Chodikov, who was the secretary, said, did you hear what the Rebbe said? And he said, no, because like he couldn't be what the Rebbe said. So he repeated it. The Rebbe says you should talk to somebody by the name of Weinreb. He'll be able to help you. So like he heard it twice, and he confirmed the third time. He's saying that I should talk to Weinreb. He says, yes. So Weinreb says to the secretary, but I am Weinreb. So the Rebbe said, Oy bazoi soll reden mit sich. If so, he should speak with himself. Now, why is this important? The Rebbe had two conflicting teachings. The one teaching was that we should talk to ourselves. And he told this to some people, find the answer yourself. Or I'm not going to tell you what to do, you'll figure out what to do. And the other times the Rebbe would say, right, tell me what's happening. But then especially in the later years, the Rebbe would say, make sure that you have a mentor, somebody that you can talk to, that you can discuss things with before you make decisions. Now, these two things, they sound conflicting, but to me, they're very different things. The one thing is telling us that before we make decisions, we should always talk to somebody else that is objective to help us make sure we're making the right decision. The other point is that we have to know that inside of us, if we find ourselves in position, God has given us the strength to make the right decisions and to come out with it and be happy and what's the right word? Confident in our decisions that we make. And this is something about leadership. Jonathan Sachs had some really famous lines on the Rebbe. One of his most famous lines about the Rebbe was, most leaders create followers, the Rebbe created leaders. And that wasn't just his shluchim that he wanted to be leaders, he wanted every single Jew to feel like a leader. The Rebbe started an organization known as Tzives Hashem for kids, where kids would find leadership positions. He said that in classrooms, when a child is misbehaving, give them a leadership position. He created organizations that should be run specifically by women for women. And he said the whole concept of a rabbi going out and being the rabbi of a shul, but that the rabbi's wife not having any major role is a non-factor. It's not something that's going to work. You go out as a couple, the rabbi does his part, the woman does his part. She's just as much of a leader as the rabbi is. Something which was unheard of in those days. And until today, shuls are now only slowly starting to, I'm talking about non-Chabad shuls, to take up this concept of where they don't just, so to speak, take on the rabbi, but they also look into the Rebbe and what can she contribute to the community. But many organizations, it was just of course there's been some great women's organizations like WUZO and all those other ones that have been very successful, but the Rebbe believed that within every community there was always a power for every individual to find space of leadership. And that's where we actually end up being much more successful. When we look at ourselves as leadership, and if we give leadership over to other people, it doesn't weaken ourselves, the leader, it doesn't weaken the Rebbe, it actually strengthens the Rebbe. It strengthens his teachings. And the same thing is with us in our personal lives. When we give leadership to our spouses, to our children, to the other rest of the family, and the other people have their say, it doesn't weaken us. Sometimes it actually will strengthen us. Comes from a perspective, a place of strength. So that's the one thing that I wanted to speak about, how the Rebbe did it, by creating leaders. And by creating leaders, he didn't just send out people to be leaders of communities, but he actually showed how everybody is literally a leader within their own community, family, business, whatever it is, you are a leader, showing us how we can be leaders. Now, there's another idea that the Rebbe really brought home, and I'll introduce this concept with just a little bit of something that somebody told me. I had a friend that used to organize shiurim for universities for his university, his college in South Africa. I'm pretty sure it was Wits University. And he would always try to bring rabbis to come. So he once told me that this is how he figured out the difference between Chabad and other organizations. I think I spoke to you about this now. It could have been you. I think I spoke to you about this concept recently. And I'm not trying to push anybody else down by saying this, but this was the Rebbe's teaching. That he said he once he organized an event. He said he never knows how many students are going to come to these classes or these talks. Makes lunch, and he brings a rabbi to talk. He says sometimes you could have 30 students, sometimes 1 or 2 students. He says the one time he organized a rabbi to come, and he wasn't a Chabad rabbi. And unfortunately, only 1 or 2 students showed up. And what happened? The rabbi was like, I'm sorry, this is beneath my dignity. I can't do this. I didn't come and prepare this whole shiur just for 1 or 2 people. Okay, he was quite disappointed. Anyway, the rabbi didn't give the shiur. A few weeks later, when he had another speaker, the same thing happened. But he had a Chabad rabbi show up that time, and again, just 1 or 2 students showed up, and he was so apologetic. I'm so sorry, I don't know. People say they're coming, and he was really he didn't want to make sure that he had that thing that happened last time. And I said, what do you mean? Even just one Jew is enough for me to give the shiur. And he said that's when I noticed the difference between Chabad and not Chabad. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to make sure that we get small crowds at our shiurim by sending out the message last minute. I'm hoping that by now people know when the shiur is, although, yes, we should be putting in more effort and we should be trying to get more people to join the shiurim and not suffice with just one. But this concept of taking care of the individual, that every person is so. My cousin's uncle said how once he went somewhere to give a talk, and they had prepared a whole talk on the importance of going to mikveh, and they invited the whole community, expecting hundreds of people. One woman showed up, and she was devastated. And he gave the talk. He was a Chabad man. He gave the talk for the one person. And later on, he found out that because of it, this lady had a whole transformation in life just because of that one talk. So what was this teaching? The Rebbe used to tell us that we're going to change the world one person at a time, but also in mass. And the Rebbe wanted, on the one hand, to do big events and get lots of people to come, but at the same time also to focus on individuals. When a Rabbi Label Wolf from Spirit Grow, he used to be a rabbi in the university, and he was actually running the Hillel over there. And years ago, and it was one of the biggest college campuses with the most amount of Jews in it. It was thousands of Jews there. And he wrote to the Rebbe, how am I going to teach all the Jews? The Rebbe said to him, find 7 students and work with them, and they will then influence another 7 students who will influence another 7 students, etc., etc. This concept of when you can't reach everybody, therefore don't reach anybody, is not eventually we will reach everybody. If anybody's interested, there's a really great article. I spoke about this, the Pew Research that has recently come out, one of the biggest research survey companies in the world. And they did a recent survey on Chabad in America. They did a survey about 10 years ago about the state of the Jewish world, and they showed everything, what's happening, and they left Chabad out of it. And a lot of people wrote to them saying that there's no element of Chabad. So they recently did a survey, and they surveyed specifically questions of connection to Chabad. And they found out that 40% of American Jewry are somewhat involved with Chabad. Just huge. That's just American Jewry. And I think in certain countries, and in countries outside of America, it's probably bigger than that. Australia for sure, and definitely in other countries. It's in Russia. If the people know they're Jewish, they're only close in that connection to Judaism is almost, there's a few other small organizations, but it's almost purely Chabad within Russia and all those other places. So as I said, it's Chabad today is in touch or in contact, or for many people, it's the only connection to Judaism. But that starts really with the individual. And focusing on individual people, and it's never just one person. It's never never look at just one person. Now there's this whole concept starts with the Rebbe's first discourse. When he accepted the leadership, he spoke about stories of Avas Yisrael, and almost all these stories of love, they're about individuals. And there was one story that the Rebbe talks about. He went through a story of each of these predecessors, the previous Rebbes of the Chabad. In the story of the Alter Rebbe, I'm going to tell you what he said. The story was about how the Alter Rebbe once went out in the middle of his prayers, he stopped his prayers and he went out to the edge of town, he chopped wood and to take care of a woman. Now, years later, the Rebbe actually said this story was actually in the middle of Yom Kippur, when people were waiting for him. He went and he broke Yom Kippur, and he went and chopped wood and which is transgressing Yom Kippur. They carried the wood over, another transgressing Yom Kippur, and then he made a fire on Yom Kippur, and then he fed to feed one woman while a whole community was waiting for him to come back and do the prayers. Once again, it's always connected to the Alter Rebbe to show that importance of the individual. This whole now here's another thing. The Rebbe's focus. So I've spoken about two things so far that I wanted to focus on with the Rebbe, how the Rebbe's vision of overcoming and rebuilding Judaism. Number one is creating leaders. Number two was focusing on individuals. Number three is making sure that everybody is taken care of in every certain type of way. And this is connected to focusing on the individuals. Rabbi Kaplan, who's now the chief, the head shliach of Baltimore, who's been there for a long time, some 40 something years. But when he was a student, he writes how in those days, it was already in the 70s or 80s, people were already getting really busy. But he found out from the Rebbe that he was just got married. He was a young married man, and there was one girl that was struggling. And the Rebbe asked that he should try to be in contact with this girl to help her with all the issues. And the Rebbe, he says how he was shocked, how the Rebbe was constantly, this girl had all different types of complaints against the Rebbe, against Judaism in general, and all her life struggles, and how all her pains and emotional issues. And the Rebbe would answer all of her questions straight away. And the one time the Rebbe sent to her a message, the one time she wrote something to the Rebbe about all the pain and suffering that she's going through. And the Rebbe responded to her, "I feel your pain." To which she said, "That's nonsense. How could you feel my pain?" So the Rebbe's response to her was, just like you have a mother, the young child that's teething, the young baby that's teething, and the baby cries from the pain of the teeth coming in, the mother feels that pain. And he says, the same way I feel your pain. And that was something that the Rebbe had a unique way of feeling and writing to people, because I honestly believe that the Rebbe did feel the pain of those people. And there was many stories of how people wrote to the Rebbe that somebody was very ill, and the Rebbe would stay up throughout the night and waiting, call me, and people didn't want to call sometimes. And then sometimes, this is another story. My grandfather, Moshe Khan, Rabbi Moshe Khan, says the story a lot, how was the birth of one of his children, how he had struggles with his wife was in labor, and it was kind of taking long. So like they were in touch with my grandfather, they were very close to my grandfather. And anyway, the baby finally was born at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And like at 5 o'clock in the morning, my grandfather gives Moshe Khan, "What's happening? No, I haven't heard from you." He says, "Oh, I didn't want to disturb you. The baby was born. Baruch Hashem, everything's fine. Things came all right. The baby was born at 3 o'clock. He's like, "I've been waiting. I've been sitting here waiting by the phone for your answer." But the Rebbe was like that for every single Jew, literally. This concept, here's an incredible story. I could show you. There's actually a video of this on Chabad.org as well, from Rabbi Lipsker in Bell Harbor. He's got one of the biggest Chabad houses, very, very big and affluent community over there. But he's created an organization called Aleph. Aleph is basically an organization which is like the chaplaincy of the Jewish chaplaincy for all American prisons. And they go around to all the prisons and do chaplaincy, etc., and take care of the prisons. So I think once in the 80s, he managed to arrange a program as a trial where inmates, selected inmates, would be able to leave prison for like 2 weeks to learn about their Judaism and prayer, etc., to help them in their rehabilitation. He managed to organize this. And part of this thing, they were going to come to 770 for a Farbrengen. And they were going to spend time in 770. Just before the Farbrengen, when the Rebbe was supposed to have come out, and the Rebbe usually, when he said it was coming out, it usually came out straight away. There was a little bit of a delay. And the Rebbe sends out a message to Rabbi Lipsker. He said, "How have you seated the prisoners?" He said, "Well, they're seated all together in one place over here. We want to seat them all together." The Rebbe said, "No, please disperse them throughout the crowd." Why? Because clearly they're going to look different. Most of the people in the crowd are going to be regular Chabad people with black hats and jackets and beards. And you're going to have a whole select crowd of people that look different. And if they're in a group, then people are going to say, like, people might come past and say, "Hey, how are you? What's your group? Where are you guys from?" And that's going to be embarrassing from them. We're prisoners. That's embarrassing. So the Rebbe said he didn't want that to happen, and therefore please disperse them around the room, because there was always people that came for Farbrengens. But if they were in a group, then people would pique their interest. In this way, making sure not to embarrass them, which I think is quite a powerful lesson. There's, I don't have the time. What's the time? Oh, it's already 9 o'clock. Okay, so that's 3 points that I wanted to mention. There's one more point that I wanted to get into, which I didn't really have the time to get into, but it's already 9 o'clock. And I think this is something which is very powerful. The Rebbe had a particular mitzvah campaign, which means campaigns focusing on different areas of Judaism to make awareness. The Rebbe had famously 10 mivtzayim, 10 mitzvahs. Now, I was hoping to have time to get into some of them, but I've run out of time. But I'll just tell you what they are quickly and short. The Rebbe's mivtzayim, his campaigns, it started off, I believe, in 1967, just before the 6-Day War. The first one was the Tefillin campaign. The Rebbe said that we're going to win the war and we will be successful and victorious because we will get people to put on Tefillin. And then whichever Chabad people in Israel at the time, he told them to go around to all the bases to start putting on Tefillin, etc. And that started the Tefillin campaign. And then the next thing there was later on, the Rebbe made a candle lighting campaign, getting all women to light Shabbat candles, even if they're not yet married. From the age of 3, all girls should light candles every Friday night before Shabbat comes in. Then he also made a kashrut campaign, helping people to become kosher. He had a mezuzah campaign, teaching people that mezuzah is actually acts like a protection over you. He had a Tarat HaMishpacha, a family purity campaign. And that's why a campaign of building mikvahs, and that's why we in Dingley are hoping to build a mikvah very soon, a ladies' mikvah, because family purity is actually the bedrock of a community. It really is supposed to be built even before we have a shul. But first you have to build the community around the shul, and that's how then you build the mikveh in our communities. That's the way it works. But we hope to have a ladies' mikveh being built soon. Torah study, and he had particular things that he wanted people to go through the weekly portion, and Tanya, the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, emphasis on finding ways to show our love to other people. Chinuch, emphasis on Jewish education. Making sure that people have Jewish books. The campaign was called A House Full of Books. Just trying to think if there was anything else that I left out. And the final one was the Mashiach campaign, teaching and educating about the concept of Mashiach. And as Reuven says, where's the Mashiach? Yeah. All right.
Where is the
Mashiach? 2 years ago, there was a conservative rabbi that gave a speech in his shul of Yom Kippur, and it's recorded live. And he says over there, the Rebbe was right. This is a conservative rabbi in one of the biggest conservative shuls in the world. It's probably talking to a crowd of over 1,000. And he says the Rebbe was right. Why? He says the Rebbe saw that the way we're going to save Judaism was by doing small, unique deeds that would keep people connected to Judaism. Humanitarianism and all these other things, yeah, they're great. And they are Jewish ideals to a certain degree. But if you want to keep and retain Judaism, it's about doing uniquely Jewish traditional acts, which ultimately, that was his way of looking at it. Of course, Hasidus, we look at it, these acts ultimately are what lead us to have a much deeper connection to our Judaism and ultimately to our Creator. So with that, I'll just like to say, this is something I just want to say. It's a little bit different, a little bit of a fluffy discussion we had here tonight, but I thought that it's important for us just to be aware of some of the important teachings of the Rebbe and how he wanted to change the face of the Jewish world. And what way he did that. And ultimately, I believe that I'm certain that ultimately we will beat out all that anti-Semitism and Nazism and all that evil. Judaism will prevail. And it will be in the way that the Rebbe had intended it to be, ultimately, which I believe is the way that God wants us to make this world a dwelling place for him. And that will be the coming of the Mashiach in a way that we all feel connected, safe, and secure, with our trust in God complete, and with happiness and health. May the Mashiach truly be experienced by us, that concept of true connection to Hashem and to true reality, very soon in our days. Thank you so much for joining. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Have a great night.
Oh, beautiful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.